Have you ever stared at a true masterpiece and just wondered what exactly makes this painting so perfect? Is it just raw, unbridled talent, or, I don't know, is there some hidden code behind the canvas? Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here, because today we're going to unpack something truly fascinating. We're diving into a brilliant ancient Indian framework known as the Ṣaḍaṅga. And honestly, this is literally the ultimate blueprint of beauty for traditional art. Here is a quick look at what we're covering in this explainer. First, the roots of Indian art. Second, mastering form and proportion. Third, infusing emotion and grace. Fourth, similitude and vibrant colors. And finally, number 5, the freedom of rules. All right, let's jump right in.
So, Section 1, Roots of Indian Art. Let's trace where all this actually started.
It's actually wild when you look at the sheer span of history behind these rules. The roots of Indian visual arts trace all the way back to the Vedic era. We're talking ancient texts like the Rig Veda mentioning decorative drawings around ceremonial altars. But the really specific principles we're zeroing in on today, those were first clearly laid out around the 3rd to 4th century CE in the Kama Sutra by Vatsyayana, where painting is actually listed as one of these 64 arts essential for a cultured life. Then, a few centuries later, between the 5th and 7th centuries, these rules got elaborated on in incredible detail in the Chitra Sutra section of the Vishnu Dharmottara Purana. And the best part? They weren't just left in the dust of the past. They were completely revived in the early 20th century by the modern artist Abanindranath Tagore, basically to bring that indigenous grace back to Indian art. So all of that rich history, it basically culminates in this single foundational Sanskrit shloka. If you were a painter in ancient India, this right here, this was your ultimate checklist for a perfect painting. Okay, so the term Shadanga translates directly to 6 limbs. Shad means 6 and anga means limb or part. And I've got to say, I absolutely love this metaphor. It suggests that an artwork isn't just, a flat collection of paint on a surface, it's a living, breathing body. Just as a human body is considered deficient or incomplete without all its limbs, a painting simply cannot survive without all 6 of these components working seamlessly together.
Moving on to Section 2, Mastering Form and Proportion. Time to get into the technical side of things.
So, the absolutely crucial starting point is Rupa Beta, which translates to the distinction or the secrets of form. Rupa means form, both the visual form we literally see with our eyes and the mental form we perceive with our soul. Beta means difference. This limb demands spot-on draftsmanship. An artist has to have the ability to differentiate forms with absolute clarity to prevent things from getting monotonous. Like if you're painting a warrior, you've got to capture that muscular build, right? But if it's a dancer, it's all about those graceful, flowing curves. To give you an idea of just how demanding Rupa Beta actually is, the ancient sources note that an artist's knowledge of form has to be so subtle and so starkly accurate that a work must be articulate enough for the ordinary eye to instantly decipher the difference between a man who is merely sleeping and a man who is dead. Think about that. That is the insane level of visual mastery we're talking about here. Now, once you actually have the form down, it has to be guarded by the second limb, pramana, or proportion. This is where art essentially meets mathematics. Pramana is all about perception, measurement, and structure. It's the rule that ensures figures and objects relate harmoniously to one another and to the overall space of the canvas.
But here's the thing, pramana isn't just about using a ruler to make sure an arm isn't too long. Proper proportion actually symbolizes cosmic order, which is known as dharma in Indian philosophy. By mastering structural anatomy and scale, the artist is quite literally reflecting the stable, rhythmic balance of the universe itself right there upon the canvas. It's what evokes that profound sense of stability and aesthetic pleasure when we look at a great painting.
Which brings us to Section 3, Infusing Emotion and Grace. This is where we breathe life into the art.
So the third limb is bhava, and that is the emotional disposition or state of mind. Basically, this is the infusion of mood and inner sentiment into the artwork. Drawing from ancient dramatic theories, bhava requires the artist to convey deep psychological depth through facial expressions, subtle gestures, and postures. It is exactly what makes a static, motionless subject suddenly appear totally alive and deeply relatable to us.
And bhava can actually be broken down into 2 distinct types. You have overt emotions, which are revealed directly to you, the viewer. And then you have covert emotions, which are these hidden, subtle feelings. Take a second and really think about that. How exactly would you go about painting an invisible mood? Because without pava, a painting might be technically flawless, but it's going to remain completely emotionally barren.
To elevate that emotion even further, we arrive at the fourth limb, Lavanya Yojanam. This is the skillful application of grace and beauty. It's that magical quality that elevates the mundane right up to the sublime. In fact, the sources point to the famous ancient Yakshi sculpture of Ditagranj as the ultimate hallmark of Lavanya. It's the stunning life-size work where the creator truly infused an unparalleled sense of poise and grace into her beauty.
To really hammer home the importance of lavanya, the sources present this brilliant analogy that I just love. Imagine a rich curry packed with every possible flavor and exotic spice, but it's entirely missing salt. Just as that deliciously spiced curry completely loses its charm without salt, a painting, no matter how technically perfect or vibrantly colorful it is totally lifeless without the grace of lavanya.
All right, Section 4, Similitude and Vibrant Colors. Let's talk about bridging art and reality.
The fifth limb here is Sadrishyam, which means similitude or likeness. This requires the artist to deeply observe and replicate the true essence of their subjects. But we aren't just talking about basic robotic copying. It's more like interpretive realism. It's capturing the exact texture of foliage, or, say, the sheen of silk on a king's robe, so perfectly that it reflects his actual status and personality. The artist is striving to achieve this similitude through forms, attributes, and even virtues. To give you a highly specific example of how this plays out, the ancient Chitra Sutra text actually mentions 5 types of eyes an artist can paint, and they're all derived directly from the shapes of nature. So for example, artists could paint eyes shaped like a fish, a conch shell, or lotus petals. It's such a brilliant way to ground abstract concepts in observable truth. It makes the art instantly recognizable and authentic to the human eye.
And that brings us to the sixth and final limb, Varna Kabanga. This is the differentiation and application of colors, and it's the step that truly lends a soul and inner character to an artwork. We're talking about the incredibly skillful use of pigments, which were often made from minerals or earth-based dyes back then, layered and blended to create deep atmosphere and volume.
You see, in traditional Indian aesthetics, the beauty doesn't actually exist in the color itself. I mean, anyone can just slap red or blue on a canvas, right? The true beauty lies entirely in its masterful application. A master painter magnifies the splendor of the artwork entirely through the strength and confidence of their brushstrokes. The myriad hues are used not just for outward appearance, but as a direct expression of the subject's inner character.
Finally, Section 5, the freedom of rules, transcending those boundaries. Now, looking back at everything we've just covered, it's totally natural to wonder, do these ancient, incredibly strict mathematical canons and checklists actually stifle artistic creativity? Doesn't having to follow a rigid 6-step rule book kind of limit a painter's imagination?
Well, the ancient texts actually argue the exact opposite, which is fascinating. These rules do not curtail artistic freedom, they actually aid it. The ancient texts explain that the artist ultimately needs to experience the mysteries of art way beyond mere cognitive intellect. These instructions, as incredibly valuable as they are entirely subservient to practice. By mastering the strict boundaries first, the artist gains the ultimate freedom to transcend them and reach the real rasa, that true divine essence of the work.
Which leaves us with a truly profound thought to end on today. In art, we see that mastering the strictest of rules is exactly what gives you the power to unleash total creative freedom. It really makes you wonder, if these absolute boundaries are what allow an artist to capture a soul on canvas, what other structures and boundaries in your own life might actually be the very things setting you free? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible ancient blueprint. I hope this explainer completely changes the way you look at a painting the next time you visit a museum.